What you're looking at is my case number with the United States Justice Department in Washington. You're also going to see my case number with the Adjutant General's office and Mr. O'Malley. Be assured, all the evidence you see in this video, all depositions, Mr. Renner's, Mr. Cohen's, Mr. Freriedman's, are all going to be submitted as evidence with all emails, text messages. Everything you see in this video is going to be turned over to these offices. My daughter Mariah was alienated from me. Part of her issues is being abandoned, alone. That's why Mariah had me here. Ask yourself this. Ask the court, what have I done by putting these videos? In fact, we're still in business with expenses because people do believe us, and we're getting most of our business from the people who are watching the videos, interesting enough. But this court would ask itself, why have I gone to these extremes? It is because of my daughter. And what happened? I could submit to this court the letter to my daughter on the day I left, on my birthday. Now you tell me if that's the little girl that didn't love her father, who never saw her father again. This is why. This is what motivates me to go forward. Why don't you read the therapist reports for the children and find out that if I didn't have a close relationship with all my children, where she didn't. Hello, crime fighters. Mike Gill. I promised you a video. In fact, I promised you a very important video. Well, I'm going to give it to you. This was really an update to the wall of corruption. And in putting all these pieces together, I've got a pretty rock-solid case to put in front of you that would incriminate senators, judges, federal judges, law firms, FBI, for those non-believers. Just step through this with me. I will go piece at a time. I want you to refer back to the old wall of corruption, to know that this still is an update. But I'm calling this the art of war. Yeah, this has been a war. And this has been a strategy. They've had all the cards, every one of them. But we're going to win. And you're going to win. Whether you deserve it or not. And I'll show you how. So, looking at this and planning a strategy for the battle, you have to kind of understand your opponent and how they think. Some dark places I had to go to think like them. But I did come up with this. There's three clear areas. There's the court corruption piece, the tax fraud piece, and the banking piece. All separate. And you know what? They attacked them that way too. It was like this group had this piece, this group had this piece. Organized. You know, like in organized crime. But that's what they were doing. Then, I sued Linda Nakamura. Linda Nakamura was in charge, she was a paralegal, in charge of depositions. Now you see all the people I sued. Hundreds of depositions should have been ordered and done. That would have solved all our problems and put all these corrupt politicians, judges, lawyers in jail. But I didn't get them. You see, that was her job. And that is why I'm suing her. Because of that. She sued me back. First time. But, you know why? Because she's holding them hostage. She's blackmailing the bad guys. You know, Peabody Arnold, Morris Mahoney, the dirty politicians in New Hampshire. She has them and leveraging them. See, because if you go after me, I get to depose those guys. We can't have that. Who would know that we couldn't depose those guys? How about her? Because that was her job. So now she's blackmailing them. Right. So then it brought me to the point where Attorney Barrington, he's helped us on a little piece here, but I know he's been working for them right along. He wrote a dismissal. One that I'll bet the New Hampshire court's going to pass and kick her case against me right out. Mike Gill wins the case, so we don't do depositions, and she loses her leverage. See? So then I looked at the 4 people that we did have depositions for. And if we know that they had to have a reason for having them, let's look there. And that's exactly what I did. And I'll tell you who I found. But I'm going to get there from using a witness, a very important witness. And that important witness is Marisa Pursuto. She was my attorney working out of the Bob Jutris's office. Bob Jutris was my divorce attorney. We'll get back to him. But her responsibility became, because she was outraged by what she was seeing in the divorce court. She, in fact, got threatened herself, and she called the FBI. In fact, they hacked into her computer. You can see in the emails that she's concerned about her safety, and my safety too. Now, what you're going to see, the first part of what she did is a narrative, was all the information that went to Morris Mahoney to file the complaints, the information that went in the complaints. You see, she was feeding them. In fact, I have an email from Nick Alexander that I was CC'd on. Goes, thanks, Marisa. You've been a huge help to us in this case. And this master chronology will serve multiple purposes. Oh, it did. See? So that's what they were supposed to form the cases. Except for, you're going to see that they didn't. Now, we're going to attach what Marisa wrote in the first part of her narrative. This is the information that incriminates Divine Millimat, 10 and 10, CCR, McLean, and then subsequently takes down all the judges, including now the tax fraud. See, in her investigation, she was putting the pieces together, trying to get everybody to go to the FBI. Now, we went with our new piece. When she found out that what Morris did, she wrote a second narrative. This narrative would put the cover-up people in jail. And I'm going to have you hear that from her now. She's not doing the reading, but every word is her own. And this is what they're so concerned about. Listen, I will follow up, and I'll put all the rest of the pieces together. I will tell you what this narrative gets us.
The initial introduction to Nick Alexander came through Rob Fitzgerald of the Lorenzi Group, originally hired in the divorce case to be an expert witness with regard to computer hard drives in the summer of 2011. Rob F. had originally been hired by Jonathan Ross, formerly of the defunct Wigan and Norrie, as a computer expert to testify in my divorce. When Mike Gill eventually hired Bob Jutris, we were still engaging Rob's services. Rob and his company do a great deal of work for the New Hampshire legal community as legal experts with regard to computer forensics. In July 2011, Rob F. had a strange reaction to attorney Bob Jutris as new divorce counsel and attorney Marisa Pizzuto, who Bob hired to help with my case as to the children's issues. With Bob only having been in the case for approximately 2 to 3 weeks and digesting the previous 4 years of litigation from nearly 35 bankers' boxes, disheveled and completely unorganized files of all previous divorce counsel in the case, Rob F. literally went over the top, wild yelling at Bob that he wasn't servicing his clients because he was not addressing the evident unethical and sleazy behavior of opposing counsel in the case. Of course, this would seem to be the right thing to be saying if one was highly concerned for Mike Gill, Rob F. proceeded to accuse Attorney Jutras of failing to have opposing counsel arrested because his client had been in contempt of an order in the case. That is where Rob lost credibility, since he was so outraged about something that didn't make sense. He kept saying that he had seen this done many times before and that Attorney Jutras was committing malpractice not to have opposing counsel arrested. This was so ridiculous and distracting to the case that Marisa Pizzuto sat Mike Gill down and respectfully requested that he speak to Rob and inform him that he really didn't have proper understanding of the procedures in such a case, and that having opposing counsel arrested for their client's alleged contempt actions was actually not possible. Shortly thereafter, Rob F. calmed down and offered instead his help in connecting with a good Boston malpractice firm. He raved about Nick Alexander at Morris Mahoney and how he had witnessed him do these kinds of malpractice cases before, and that he thought Nick was great. In or about August of 2011, Mike Gill did meet with Nick in Boston and went ahead with hiring him in the prominent firm of Morris Mahoney. An attorney-client fee agreement was signed and retainer paid to Morris Mahoney. Nick offered Mike an apparent deal that he couldn't refuse, $200 an hour and 10% of the case. It is noteworthy that Nick is in the technology litigation department at Morrison and has never done malpractice litigation, which he only told Mike in May of 2012. The firm represents on their website that they have a professional malpractice department within the firm. Attorney Alexander is not in that department. Wiggin and Norrie and Jonathan Ross, Mike's previous divorce attorneys, were suing Mike for $100,000, and that opened the door for the first of the malpractice suits, and this was the starting point for Nick and Eric in or about September of 2011. What Bob and Marisa did not know is that simultaneously Rob F. was steering Mike to another divorce attorney. However, Mike declined to interview the divorce attorney. Rob called Mike to encourage him to reconsider this Boston divorce attorney who was willing to only charge $200 an hour. Mike declined as he was satisfied that Attorney Jutras was honest and had begun the work in a proper way. Thereafter, Rob F. seemed to perform as you would expect an expert witness to perform his services, and he and Bob seemed to get along fine. No issues were ever raised by Rob F. again. This was another professional in my case and paid by me, but not working in my interest. Question: why would Rob Fitzgerald advocate so zealously for Mike Gill to sue that very law firm that his company, the Lorenzi Group, is often hired by? Their own business does a high volume of work with the New Hampshire law firms involved. FYI, Alex Walker had also attempted to dissuade me from hiring Bob Jutras. It was known that Bob was honest and couldn't be controlled, and they didn't want outside eyes looking at the case. Nicholas Alexander and his associate, Eric Renner, began their work in early September. Generally, their posture in each discussion was to minimize many of their claims as too difficult to prove. Mike Gill then asked Marisa Pizzuto to help transition the case, which would save time and money, as she had already helped organize the 35 or so boxes of files and help prepare the divorce case. There was a sealing order that was in effect in the family court, and the plan was for Marisa to focus on transitioning primarily the facts and documents relating to the legal matters handled by Alex Walker and Divine Millamette and Branch, and other matters unrelated to the divorce proceedings. The issues with Alex Walker and DM were a large portion of the issues, as Alex Walker had really quarterbacked all of my legal matters, both corporate and personal, since 2002. Right off the bat, we had an issue of finding New Hampshire counsel to be a placeholder in the New Hampshire court, since Nick and Eric were not licensed in New Hampshire. Morris Mahoney employs literally hundreds of attorneys, and not one of them could represent Mike in New Hampshire courts. The Morris Mahoney website shows many of their attorneys with New Hampshire licenses. Nick told us the 3 lawyers in their Manchester, New Hampshire office all had conflicts with Wiggin and Norrie. He implied they had worked directly with John Ross, although it wasn't clear what these relationships were. Wiggin and Norrie had been around for about 100 years as a domestic relations firm. All 3 of the lawyers in Manchester do some kind of insurance and or commercial litigation. The website doesn't mention any previous careers at Wiggin and Norrie or domestic relations practice. We end up having Henry Hyder to be the placeholder for in the malpractice countersuit. Henry had been representing MSI in some employee-related litigation. Henry Hyder admitted to Mike Gill that Alex Walker approached him via phone call right off the bat upon knowing of his representation of Mike in MSI. Since that time, Henry has exhibited serious anxiety and expressed a flat-out refusal to represent Mike in any lawsuit against Alex Walker. Henry Hyder. There is an issue with having Henry in this case because Alex Walker got to Henry right away and intimidated him into playing on the opposing team. This was obvious right from the beginning of working with Henry. Henry told Mike Gill that Alex Walker called him as soon as he was aware Henry was working with me. Thereafter, Henry acted very nervous and had been sporadically absent from the case, and then reappears only to call with probing questions to Mike, Marisa, and Bob. Nick never would entertain my concerns with regard to getting Henry out of the case. Even John Freriedman had offered to make the connection to an attorney in his office who is licensed in New Hampshire. Marisa Pizzuto and Mike Gill made several requests by email and in person that Nick contact John Freriedman for many reasons, including the New Hampshire counsel issue. He ignored these requests and found no other options despite his obvious ability and resources to do so. Whenever Mike raised concerns about Henry's true position, Nick would convince him there was no issue with Henry. This situation felt increasingly strange as time went on. Henry remained absent from the case for long periods of time and at one point demanded that Mike sign a release for him as to any potential allegation of conflict of interest for representing MSI. In the position which Alex Walker represented me for years and never raised any concern about conflict of interest, where my ex-wife had been partial owner of the corporation. Neither Henry Hyder or Nicholas Alexander ever mentioned that there had been requests and communications with counsel for Devine, Willamette, and Branch as early as September or October 2011. Mike Gill never found out that they had been in communication until approximately April of 2012. Mike was not copied on any of the written communications. They had, in fact, upon an oral request, received all of DM&B internal emails since 2002 without any formal request or complaint being filed. Mike Gill made several requests himself and through Marisa to have Nick speak directly with John Freriedman, as John had represented MSI in front of the Mass Banking Department and certainly had very relevant and important information and perspective. Nick simply would not make the call. When the news came out about John being appointed to the Massachusetts Board of Bar Overseers, we shared this information with Nick, thinking surely this would prompt him to understand how valuable John could be to this case. Still no contact. Finally, Mike was strenuously requesting that everyone that was on his team sit down at one table and pull together a strategy. It was beginning to feel too much like Nick was being a cowboy and that things were being stalled. Mike requested such a meeting to include John Freriedman, Bob Jutras, Marisa Pizzuto, and Nick and Eric. Nick called Marisa to say that he would probably meet with John alone. No explanation or rationale given. Nick finally did, in fact, reach out to John. Nick and Eric met then with Marisa and Mike. In fact, any communication with John was always done specifically without Mike or Marisa present. Nick would not allow John to even be conferenced in on calls that we had. Nick and John have never actually shared any information about any of the conversations they have had with me. In retrospect, we have compared with John some information Nick relayed about their conversations, and it appeared that he was manipulating the information between me and John. As Mike continued to grow more impatient with the time that was passing, a few interesting things happened. 1. Star witness Darla Sedgwick was an associate working on my case at Wiggin & Norrie and was named as a defendant in the counterclaim malpractice suit against Wiggin & Norrie, is interviewed by Nick and Eric back in November 2011. Darla was let go from Wiggin & Norrie at the time Mike fired the firm and she moved to Oklahoma. It was a very strange day and started out as marked for deposition and turned into an interview. Darla seemingly gave some very helpful information to us that day. However, she left without signing any kind of statement or affidavit. There was a whole orchestration put on in which she dramatically fires her attorney, who appears not to be representing her interests that day. But he doesn't leave and continued to sit in the interview. Nick acted shocked and appalled at the situation. End result is that after all the drama, Darla leaves for Oklahoma not having been deposed and not having signed a single statement. 2. Nick repeatedly told Mike Gill that the management at his firm does not want him to work on the case. He told Mike, however, that he is just so devoted to him as a client he is prepared to leave Morrison after 21 years and go to another firm and take my case. He emphasized that finding the right firm might take some time and he was in the process of looking, etc. This went on for months and continued right up until the present. He just kept saying that it would take more time, a few more weeks. 3. Nick told Mike that he had engaged the services of a public relations firm, Thompson Communications in Middleton, Mass., to help manage our media campaign. Funny thing is that Morrison Mahoney was willing to do the contract directly with Thompson but would not sign the malpractice complaint. When Mike arrived for the first meeting, Nick, Eric, Marisa, Thompson, and me, Nick first met alone with Dave Thompson and then brought us all in the room. Again, Mike Gill was never told what was in the conversation with Thompson. This was the pattern. 4. After this meeting, Marisa received a call from Nick in which he literally yelled at her about our inability to sue the NHBD because MSI had been in violation of some regulations in 2008, in that John Freriedman told him about these violations, and this would prevent going after the banking department. He was yelling at her for not vetting those facts. Funny thing is that she had provided a narrative of the facts, which included information about the 2008 violations, to Nick and Eric about a month previously. Further, Nick was told these facts verbally by Mike and Marisa, so his accusation that she had not vetted the facts and that John had stated that we could not go after the NHBD was very odd and was an attempt to intimidate her. Nick was further telling Marisa she shouldn't believe anything Mike is saying just because he is an intimidating salesman. 5. Marisa had found an NHBD consent order online earlier that same week which proved that the star character in the implode case, Brian Battersby, had been exonerated for NHBD violations a week or so after he testified in a deposition at Divine Millimet in the implode case. Nick didn't react with enthusiasm to his finding, which is strange since it helped prove a motivation in Mike's case. 6. Nick had always said Mike would not get a fair trial in the state of New Hampshire and we needed a federal judge, and the only remote chance was to get a RICO charge. Then, Nick said that John specifically said not to sue the NHBD. John Freriedman denied stating this to Nick. 7. Nick told Mike in approximately May of 2012 that he is not actually a litigator and we will now have to actually hire another lawyer to litigate the case. Mike fully believed he was hiring a litigator when I hired him and Eric from a prominent litigation firm. 8. All of a sudden, at the beginning of May, Eric becomes frantic to draft the complaints against the 21 defendants due to their concerns about the running of some of the statutes of limitations. They were forcefully targeting the filing date as May 11th. Despite Mike's repeated requests, they flat out refused to include attorney Tara Schaff of Tober Law Offices. She played a major role in Mike's divorce case, and particularly the loss of Mike's relationship with his only daughter, which has been the most difficult part of this entire legal fiasco. 9. The other issue about this complaint was that Nick was telling Mike that he would have to be filing pro se because of Nick's status at MM and because he couldn't put their name on it, and once he was settled at his new firm, he would sign on and there would be no issues. He claimed he was very concerned about the running of the statute of limitations and it just couldn't wait. Nick said for months he was leaving Morrison and he kept moving the date further out, and this was a stall. Mike now doesn't believe Nick had any intention of leaving the firm and taking Mike's case because he was just so devoted to the case. In fact, he now believes that due to a conflict of interest, Morrison Mahoney's 6th largest client is the insurance carrier for Divine Millimet. Nick was again stalling and running out of statute of limitations, which is already turning out to be the exact thing happening. Nick waited until Friday, May 11th to call John Freriedman to see if his firm could sign the pleadings in the interim until he could step into the case. It was represented to John on the phone that Nick had already reached out to the parties to let them know that he would be signing on. Nick never indicated to Mike that he had made any contact whatsoever with any of the parties. After Mike fired Nick, he became angry about the pro se filing. Nick told Marisa that none of the parties had any knowledge of the complaint, not served yet, and that organizing a settlement meeting would be time-consuming, and he couldn't make that happen right away. Then he went on later to sign an affidavit for the family court in which he stated that he had told the parties in advance of his intentions to sign on to the complaint after making Mike file pro se. 10. On May 10th, Eric forwarded a draft to Marisa and Mike. There was very apparently still a volume of work that was needed on this nearly 80-page document. Nick doesn't appear to have been supervising this drafting at all. Marisa took the initiative to set up a conference call to go over the document line by line to make sure the facts were correct, etc. Eric made the statement to her that he really just wanted to get it filed on Friday and get it done. It was shocking that a firm of the caliber of MM was willing to file a document in that condition and without review by the supervising attorney. 11. John Freriedman was called the very day to sign the pleadings for documents he had never even read, and MM knew the fraud that had been committed and didn't want their name on it. Although Mike did receive an invoice for legal fees with the name of the firm on it for $43,000. Since catching Nick, he has repeatedly called Marisa to see what she knew about why Mike was so upset with Nick and Eric. They were particularly interested in whether Mike was having financial problems. 12. The pleading was filed on May 14th in a very, very rushed fashion. Mike filed pro se, and Mike felt very uncomfortable about doing this, but felt intimidated that there may be statutes of limitations running, and filed the documents under duress.
You just heard Marisa's narrative, her words. She questioned me, she questioned Bob, she questioned all about the case, but that's how she formed the information in making these cases. Well, she did the same thing here. So that narrative, Marisa and myself, we went to see John Freriedman for help.
Hey, Mike, John Freriedman, got your message. Sorry I missed your call. You called on my cell and I was in the office, and so it doesn't ring through. In any event, I don't know about any meeting on Friday. It is not including me. I don't see any reason for delay. I don't know what Nick is thinking in terms of the delay. I certainly think that irrespective of the lawsuit, going to the authorities would be the smart move now. I also wanted to confirm with you, we have a meeting scheduled with MFA in Tewksbury for the 29th at 10:30 in the morning. They are going to be part of our plan of what we say back to the state of New Hampshire Banking Division. I think, notwithstanding the lawsuit and notwithstanding the investigation, we have to make it look like it's business as ordinary, and part of it is to respond to the consent decree proposal. So anyway, I'm going to try you at your office. It's a few minutes after 9 right now, but I did want to get back to you. Unfortunately, I didn't hear the phone ring. The easier number during the day to get me is 617-723-7700, extension 171. Thanks, Mike. Hey, Mike, John Freriedman. Trying to explain to you, or calling to try to explain to you the problem that we have. We would have the same problem that Morris and Mahoney had, which is we have a partner here, Mike Tracy, that does insurance defense for legal malpractice. If we were to take the case on, we would end up suing clients of ours. We would run into the same problem that Morris and Mahoney had when they committed malpractice by not telling you that and having to disqualify themselves. I'm not willing to do that because it's unethical and improper. So that's why I keep telling you that we have a conflict and cannot represent you against them because their insurer is somebody that we do business with. Okay? So I wanted to try to make that clear to you because it didn't seem like it was coming through in the writings. If you have any questions, though, please give me a call. Thanks.
Do you know what he did with our narrative? He sent it out. He gave it to a gentleman named Frank Libby, an attorney, like he was going to get us an attorney. Wow. Thanks, Mr. Freriedman. Except for you gave us a white-collar attorney who had cases with the FBI, not malpractice. Remember, we just went through that. And again with you. Turns out Mr. Libby had a conflict, after he read our whole narrative. In fact, you also gave it, and lied about giving it, to both individuals on a deposition until we showed you an email. Rasky, PR firm. Now, why did you give it to them? And they came back to you and said, we've got a conflict. I don't know, is it a good idea to find out if they have a conflict before you give them every piece of evidence and information we have to the present? Turned out it might have been. So Freriedman was working with them all. There's the mystery. Marisa, she ratted us both out. He then told them that Marisa had to be stopped. Okay? I'm going to take you to her emails to me after this happened. Right after the narrative. Right after Freriedman. Freriedman didn't get us our help. Not one lawyer. Right? Not one. In fact, if you look at all these lawyers we're going to put together, only one of them filed a lawsuit. And weeks before that, he was making pieces. Burning them, too. All right. So let's get into Marisa's mindset right after the Freriedman. This is when they would have had to come to her. She resigned shortly afterwards. Stayed on for a little longer, and I'll tell you why. She recognized Ted Little and Tony Aguirre, Ted, who I brought in, my own attorney, were spies. She understood that then. I'll read. Marisa. Mike, on LinkedIn, you can see that Tony was in the same department as Nick at Morris Mahoney. He claims to have saved tons of money for insurers. See, Ted had to hire Anthony Aguirre. Aguirre is his resume right here, and we'll post it for you. But you'll notice that he worked at Divine Millimat and Morris Mahoney, right? He worked for them both. But Ted needed them. You know why Ted needed them? He didn't need them. Peabody and Otto, Morris Mahoney, they needed somebody they could trust because Ted was cracking. Just before we move off of Ted, remember, the texter who threatened to murder my children who called the officials in New Hampshire are the corrupt. You heard Marisa say the same thing. See? They're both on the same page, and they're both worried about their safety, and so is Dollar. Now listen, this was his last couple days, Ted. This was text message back and forth to me. Ted, I hope Tony's working on the Morris Mahoney piece. This is the first priority I want him doing. That's before he does anything else. Eats, sleeps, or shits Morris Mahoney. I think I was pretty direct. Yes, we are both working on it. And other things, including the audit. We have lots of work on it. We know that this is a priority. Really? Mike, I emailed you early this morning. My resignation letter to you. See, he was supposed to have it the next day. We should talk and meet today, so please call me to discuss. You know, he didn't like talking on the text. These guys are very clever that way. This is my text back to him after he just said, thank you, resignation. So, what in 11 weeks go by? You never put your name on Morris Mahoney lawsuit. Interesting. What if I told you I had a bet going with a number of people that you would never put your name on it? Really? And then I said, hey, you remember this? I had them watch that day. There's the camera of Ted leaving with information and evidence. Remember the texter said that they have files and information I've never seen. I don't know. Is that a way of having it leave? To him. Hey shithead, I heard you ask for the super shredder yesterday. He couldn't have the regular shredder. We needed the super shredder. Must have done a lot of shredding afternoon. Gus was telling me, interesting, I make sure that it's on the BBO complaint. Did Gus tell you I also showed him what I was shredding? Those were 2 old drafts of the Banking Commission complaint. Oh, the Banking Commissioner complaint. You know, the one that you screwed up on purpose. You don't want anybody to see that, do you? So there's Ted. Tony was Ted's watchdog. Right. So let's go on. Marisa's emails. Tony is running back, telling everything to the other side. Will keep blocking us. Can't out. Just say nothing except that you want Morris Mahoney filed. See? I hired them both, Tony and Ted, to file one complaint against Morris Mahoney. Guess what? Didn't do it. Quit the day before it was supposed to be delivered. Right? They weren't going to do this. They knew how important Morris Mahoney was. Next email. I am 100% sure, this is Marisa, that Tony's job is set me up the way they set Dollar up. You remember Dollar, and you remember her text. I am afraid I'm being physically, psychologically, financially tortured. I am scared to death. She doesn't want to be another Dollar. Now, she met Dollar. She was there when Dollar met the statement. And you're right. Dollar was Ross's buffer. Marisa, what you're going to find out is you were Bob's, Jutris's, you know, the guy you married. Right. Can a wife testify against the husband? I don't know. We'll find a good lawyer and we'll get the answer. Again, to the text again. You went around saying the feds for weeks. She's referring to me. And Bob called. They got there too. Bob Jutris called the feds and came back and said they got there too. Now, Bob was working with him, Marisa, but that's true. They had gotten there too. Stop trying to threaten them. I'll ask Jean again, but she just carved out a legitimate piece for the IRS. See, we're trying to attack there too. You went around for weeks saying feds. And then Bob called. Bob Jutris called. They had gotten there too. They stopped the attempt to give the information to the FBI. That would mean the FBI stopped it. Obviously, Ortiz's office got a call when they had their heads up. Simple thing for them to do. They called Ortiz. Listen, Freriedman mentioned he lived on the same street, knew Ortiz, and was going to talk to them. We'll go through his deposition. Bob was going to talk to Ortiz. Nick Alexander was. See, everybody was going to go to the feds.
Hi, Mike. It's Nick. I've got your email. I want to chat with you about some of those things. I think I can help you with the letter to the feds. I'm one of the few lawyers who've been able to trigger an investigation. But I also want to talk to you about the strategy, some issues you need to be aware of, switching the PR firm based upon our legal research. You need to be careful with that. And just talk about the email generally. 617-737-8863. I'll be tied up in the afternoon. I'm free until about 1:30. It's around 11:10 now. Thanks. Bye.
And that would have been their excuse. I thought you went. No, I thought you went. Just as long as I didn't go. See? They were telling me they were going and setting an appointment for me. So it's a lie. Then she goes, now she understands. She knows Ted and Tony are spies. She's been told that now, which is why the level of fear that she has. She's not working on the case anymore. She's worried about her own safety and her future. They threatened her by turning around and giving information. So when they were filing Morris Mahoney, they were corrupting her, and she knew it. It was the extortion they needed to get her to shut up. There it was. Here's another statement. Just watched Zero Dark 30, movie about catching bin Laden, penetrating the terrorist organization, finding the truth. Remind me of the legal terrorists in New Hampshire. Again, you keep understanding the fear factor of the very evil, corrupt group at the top. It's beyond criminal. Her words. She knows. She's identified. But you have to do it covertly. Your safety is in danger. Don't be vocal moving forwards. Well, you can see that didn't work. Mike, I have some information that will change the face of this thing, but you need to be super careful, including your own safety. She knew this narrative. Why do you think she kept saying safety at the end? Mike, yes, there is. It is all powerful big firms. All the ones you have sued. Connected to the judiciary. Certain judges. This is the closed network protecting each other and running the show. This is very obvious why you can't get justice in New Hampshire or Massachusetts. See? They work together. It's the insurers that work together too. Marisa, The closed, the corrupt, the protected old boy network is the reason why your whole life has been fucked. You will never get justice in New Hampshire. You do have to get out tangled web and think outside the box. How's this for outside the box? Mike, it's both really predicting is to read the level of evil properly. Regular chess moves do not work with the evil. Oh, yes, they do. In fact, they actually work easier with the evil because they get all too confident about how they move. He was just trying to distract me, and Tony was setting up the dollar trap. That's how she finished, the dollar trap. She knows about Dollar, who's living in hiding in Oklahoma, afraid for her death. She associated Dollar because that's exactly what they did to her right then. Which is why we've never had her in a deposition. You think if we went to Morris Mahoney's lawsuit that she wouldn't have sued as a witness? Instead, we only have Freriedman. So let's go to him. That's right. Morris Mahoney had one deposition and rented. No third parties. Do you know why Freriedman had his deposition there? See, nothing happens by accident. Ask Linda Nakamura. Because Freriedman, right after the deposition, told me that Gary Lambert, it's a gentleman right here. Okay, we'll post it. Now, Lambert is an attorney from New Hampshire, ex-military, thinking that maybe I would trust somebody, that appears to have honor. No such luck. State senator was running for, the Nashua area, was running for Congress. Wow. He says, Mike, he'll mediate, fix everything for you. Really? In fact, if you look at Freriedman's deposition, it's October 2nd. The ink wasn't dry, and Gary and Lambert and I talked, myself. Sure, he wants to take it on. In fact, I will enclose a $2,000 check and a signed fee agreement. It was all on board, except for he called me the next day. Yeah, and I have two witnesses that were there. You know what Lambert said? It looks like you might be suing John. He's my only conflict. Really? Turns out you had others, didn't you? And you have to give John a release. See, John, Morris Mahoney knew they were working together. If they formed this, then come back, criminate themselves in a deposition, then give me a release. Kind of smooth, huh? Well, here we go. But I didn't now, did I? And what did I tell you, Gary Lambert? I told you I was going to get you too. And I keep my promises. Okay, let's go to Freriedman now. Right? Freriedman had a deposition, the one deposition. Look at this, let's go. Did you have a conversation with Bob Jutras about Ortiz? He goes, you mean Carmen Ortiz? Yes. She is the U.S. Attorney for Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and I did have conversations with Mr. Jutras about that. Now, what do you think they're talking? Making birthday plans with Miss Ortiz, or there's some serious shit going down? Then we go, who initiated the whole idea of talking to the FBI? You mean Ortiz? The guy initiated with Mr. Jutras. So Jutras told him and him to go. So they were both to go. Remember Marisa saying Bob said they stopped? Who do you think stopped them? They both stopped. They were working together. And go on. Did you ever receive a narrative from him? I guess meaning me. I don't remember the narrative. It was from Marisa. Right. See? Marisa gave him the narrative. He's the one who gave it to Rasky and to Libby and let everybody know what we were doing. Then he goes on to ask this question. We asked him this question. You referred to going to the authorities. What authorities? We're talking about the FBI and having an investigation done. What I refer to as a state corruption issue. Wow, doesn't that meet the level? In your legal opinion, what do you think occurring necessitates the FBI? There were court orders that didn't make any sense. They were believed that there was some judicial tampering on the state level involving Mr. Gill's divorce. Yeah, no kidding. And Alex Walker was pulling his strings about that. Didn't I say that? There was some ongoings on the division of banks in New Hampshire, which is the part I observed because I was involved in that. Right. He was protecting Kakavas. He was protecting Perlow. We'll turn around and look at his billing. All you do is see Perlow all over it. See? Freriedman could get us to FRM, could give us the banking commission fully on a false consent order. They had 3. They gave him the Freriedman. Freriedman sat him on them all. He was protecting the Ponzi scheme. He was protecting the corruption in the AG's office, but most importantly, banking. He knew what the deal was. That was his job. And see what he does? He says that it is corrupt. He's saying it is because he's trying to keep away from it coming to him. But don't forget, he's known it all. Let's continue. I was involved at the licensing issues. There were proposed consent order, something I've never seen before in 30 years of practice. No kidding. And then extreme aggressive approach at the first meeting. They were telling us to go ahead and sue them. You know who that person said go ahead and sue them when I reported all this crime to with FRM? Was Perlow himself. Freriedman was with me in the meeting with him, which is why he refers to it, says aggressive and sue me. Then there was another question that referred to an email that Mr. Freriedman wrote to me. And he goes, "Is this your email?" He goes, "Yes, it is. Can you read it?" "Hi, Mike, John Freriedman, trying to explain to you. I'm calling to try to explain to you the problem we have. We would have the same problem that Morris Mahoney had, which is we have a partner here, Mike Tracy, that does insurance defense for legal malpractice. If we were to take on the case, we would end up suing our own clients. We would run into the same problem Morris Mahoney had, committing malpractice by telling you that, and that having difficulty disqualifying myself." So Freriedman just said that Morris Mahoney in fact did commit malpractice by not informing me that they had conflicts. John forgot to tell me he had them too. Now, Morris Mahoney had committed malpractice. You had left that in a voice message to Mike. I did say that. All right, so you agree they meant malpractice. Freriedman went on to say, "I was referring to the fact that they apparently did not, what sounds to me, to be a thorough enough conflicts checks of taking on the representation and found that they had a conflict later on required them to withdraw. You know, the one things that would try to make sure we have no conflicts before you take a client." Well, John, you had a conflict, now didn't you? In fact, Morris Mahoney to you was even a conflict. And yet you gave our information out. Right, but you're saying clearly that they committed malpractice. And then you asked for a release. Whatever you received, would you agree that it was a narrative of some sort? Maurice's narrative, what we gave John, remember? I'm taking you back to that meeting. That's the meeting that John told them all what we were doing and making sure. Why do you think we got Ted right after that? "Oh, absolutely," he says. "I certainly recognize it from the beginning. I just know if she finished it and was in what I saw, because I remember she was still working on it, but I may have ultimately seen the final version." That was Mauricia Pursuto. That was what she put together with me, and we got too close. Last question. You were referring to said a lot of intrigue. That was one of how he answered it. He said, yeah, the banking commission. Their prime banking commission had resigned because of issues with his brother. The banking commission issues that were going on I found very intriguing. You know what the word intriguing means to a lawyer like this? very suspicious. There were people that were supposed to be confidential information that was put onto a web that was very damaging to Mr. Gill's business. See, they were trying to put us out of business because I was carrying the word still. There was being reported to me that was happening in the state courts. This was the issues with Alex Walker, and I think that he was planning his run for governor for the state. Now you do remember I said that. Hey Alex, how's that, huh? How's that for apples? Not this year. Right. But this is John Freriedman who was talking to Walker on a regular basis at some time that said he was running for governor. See? That was the reward. That's what I told you. That's what people wouldn't believe. Well, how's that? Mr. Walker was leaving his firm, was intrigued about that. At the same point, perhaps before, there was something that made me think of the intrigue that Mr. Gill had related to me. He saw the truth for himself. You know what? He was part of it. He was recruited by Walker. All right. Rudolph Freriedman. I don't remember which one specifically, but I do remember the conflict check. And they came back with multiple conflicts. That was Freriedman. That was the last inquiry. Turns out he had a conflict with damn near everybody. Right? All right, so there's Freriedman. Now don't miss Freriedman. Now let's take a look what we can get with Freriedman. Let's put him on the board. He goes front and center in the banking category. He's got regular emails, billing information that's speaking to Perlo. He's sitting on 3 false consent orders. Flory, you know, the guy who's working at New Hampshire State Credit Union, you don't think they helped him get that soft job, do you? Talking about soft jobs, Kakavis resigned, right? We'll get back to him. Going to a hospital. Walker resigns. Both of them, youngest president, U.S. attorney getting out. They're still protecting insurers, though, aren't they? They get jobs at the hospitals. So if you have law firms concerned about their insurance and fighting insurance expense, what kind of business do you think the hospital might do? You know, these are the kind of guys who bury mistakes, by the way. Right. So you can see how that works. Freriedman gives you furlough. Furlough gives you Hildreth. Furlough gives you Senator Ayotte, who was in charge of the AG's office. Furlough works for McLean. We go right back to McLean. We can take Foster out of there too. Who do you think worked with Furlough covering up the banking? See? Now if you get Hildreth, you get Shaheen. See? You get the cover-up. This guy is the key to banking. This is why Kakavis is resigning, because the back door to him is Freriedman. See? And this brings us to the FRM scandal. I want you to pay attention to this. I put this video on notice out, right? Do you remember how I said about Kakavis prosecuted? Used his business partner, Mark Howard, for months before to be the defense attorney and put the people away nice and quiet? Well, do you remember Richard Head? Richard Head was the assistant AG. We did a video with him. When he gave me his notes, we gave them to George Lambert. Remember George Lambert? And George Lambert gave them to me. These notes, if you remember how I went through them, incriminated Hildreth with his brother. Had Attorney Ashley investigating and finding it all out. Right? And do you remember what I said? Why did I get this information? I'm the last guy you would give this to. Remember I said I'm the guy who shoves it up your ass. Well then, I'm thinking, Head's bailing out, looking for immunity. So I send it to Washington. And then the FRM. And then it passes the Senate. And then Kevin Abard, a gentleman that I've worked with and I believe is 100% honest. He had good intentions putting this bill in. He didn't understand he was being played. Now I'm thinking every penny of these victims should get their money back with the apology of this state, with interest on the money that's lost. They were ripped off by your officials of this state. It was their Ponzi scheme. So, put the bill in. George Lambert co-sponsors or goes in with Kevin even to narrate the request for the bill. Except for Lambert was the guy who gave me the notes. Kind of coincidental, wouldn't you say? To fry Richard Head. But Richard, it's still dickhead, isn't it? That's right. And remember, I'm the guy who shoves it up your ass. I don't want to leave you disappointed. You gave me those to present, which I did in that finance hearing. You did that to create new evidence that would only incriminate the banking commissioner who's 7-8 years retired in a one-bedroom apartment in Kansas City and have the investigation end right there. Right. There was the back door because they're all worried about Freriedman. Doubt it? I talked to the victims. Did you know the victims were having to give George Lambert 20% of the money that they received? Yeah. If you're going to commit the dirty work for the officials of the state, he had to get paid. So he is. So let's take the money from the victims again. These guys get to spend pennies on the dollar, leverages Lambert, Lambert's getting paid. So Lambert leverages Kevin. See? We get the bill signed, you get your money, pennies on the dollar, nobody investigates. See? It's a cover-up. They gave me that information to have it get passed. You see? That's the level of chess that we're playing. The whole thing was a setup to get them off. Right. Now, I talked to Lambert about that. I'm not one to be bashful. You know what Lambert said to me? Well, he didn't say that's absolutely a lie. You know what he said? I got 12 votes already. Shut up. That's all we needed. How did he know we had 12 votes before? Right? As you noticed, George, I didn't shut up now, did I? You see how organized this was. Freriedman was banking, and they were all in touch. Now let's go to the IRS part. All right? Now the IRS part, let's go back to the 4 depositions. Now we did have one of Freriedman who immediately asked for a release. And then we had a gentleman from Barry Dunn. You might remember the video where I had Amy Miller. You're going to see a brief piece of Miller was filmed through a window from where we were to have the deposition. You see, just prior to the deposition, I had Miller given her an email the day before saying to Miller, I want to know the conversations you've had with these defense attorneys. For instance, like Curley, who was representing Morris Mahoney. And she said, in front of 2 witnesses, where's an affidavit? I'll enclose the affidavit, so you see that. They quite literally heard her say, if I tell you that, it will incriminate me. Right. And then she's outside for another hour and 15, 20 minutes. We put it on video, talking to the opposing counsel, talking to the police to get the tape that you saw. She knows what it was. She was hired by them to corrupt this. So let's take a look. The tax piece. She corrupted that deposition. You know why? Because the gentleman was told by Alex Walker what to put on the tax return and his assistant, Maurice Gilbert, with the DRA. All right, now see. This is the other section now. So Miller had 1 other deposition. So out of 4, Miller had 2. The one that blew up and Cohen. But if you notice, all in the tax category now, right? All the tax fraud. They had to blow this up because the guy turned around and said, I'm not going to lie. You gave me the information and I put it down there. Right. So it blew up. That's the information there. Miller, if you remember the text from Ted Little, Miller is a spy. Damn straight she's a spy. Now, we've only tried filing a lawsuit against her and tried serving her 16 times, including 3 times from the sheriff. Now, we found out where she works. No one told us, not all those people. Turns out, I don't think they want to find her too hard because they're told not to find her. Because what do you think she might say, the woman who said that I might incriminate me and won't say anything? See, she had to blow up the IRS piece. That was what her charge was. Right? Blow that Barry Dunn deposition up. Cohen's deposition. Now here you go. Cohen's deposition, they needed to know what I knew, right? They had the IRS issue. Why do you think in all these years of me reaching out to the IRS, nothing? TIDCA, nothing. Well, later on, I'm going to show you 2 lucky numbers. You know what those lucky numbers are? My case number from TIDCA and my file number from the United States Justice Department. They're going to get all this too. They're my new lucky numbers, and I'll post them just so you see them. Remember, we caught this corruption. We gave the information returns to Cohen. He's the one that told me that they mixed up the NOLs. Divine Millimat was charging me tens of thousands every month saying we're investigating it, we don't agree with the IRS. They messed the forms up. We'll enclose where they had, Lisa Tracy was given a statement by the IRS saying that it was a mistake. See? They knew then, but they were trying to leverage me that piece. So Cohen was the next accountant after Barry Dunn. You know, the one of the 4 depots. He had the short circuit once he had told me. This is why he had changed. And he refers to my tone in the first day because he had to come off of saying that someone from H&R Block, an untrained professional, would have laughed at this. Really? With the NOLs, it was only $29 million. All right. So let's go briefly to a couple of his questions in a deposition. You ready? Do you remember why I stopped working together? That's the question I asked him. Remember, I'm acting as my own attorney. I remember I received a phone call from you when you asked me and I told you I didn't remember something. What do you think he forgot? The NOL mistake? Right. The fact that it was put on my K-1 that justified the DRA's expensive and it wasn't a hobby? Right. He's the one who told me how that was done. Then he changed his mind. He goes, don't you remember that I called you? When you hung up the phone, you turned to your secretary and said, I don't think I'll ever work with them again. Interesting. From a tone, right? It might not have been about that you changed your mind completely. He doesn't know anything what you're talking about. For instance, why is that? Meaning my tone. I could tell by the tone of your voice. What did I say and how was my tone? Your tone. Just from that tone, that's right. Could it be why I was asking you the question I asked you? Do you remember what that was? I remember precisely. So he's remembering precisely. You asked me in a conversation I had with Larry Schwartz. Don't forget the tax piece. Schwartz is the one that prepared the taxes. He's the one that was going with Hyder to meet Tim Powell of the IRS, who Walker recruited. See? So he didn't want to go with them, but he knew what was going on. So you met with Schwartz, Cohen. That was the name of, what was the name of the attorney who asked to be there too? He goes, I don't remember. I don't know the exact number on the K-1. But you see, that's what I said. It shouldn't have been on there, 29 million. So he did know. He told me that the counsel told him to put there. The counselor told him to put there? Let's understand this. Cohen, the accountant me, who explained that it was all criminal, then lost his memory like a day later in Bob Jutrish's office, by the way. See, Jutrish was still working on all the cover-ups. He was carrying the divorce piece to the end. Okay? So Schwartz was recruited by Walker. Schwartz worked for Bill Tazia. And Bill Tazia was working with Freriedman from CCR. You know who Bill Tazia turned out to be? The first cousin of Alex Walker. They were trying to incriminate us in that audit to get us in trouble, to put us out of business. Remember, Walker had filed implode to get us out from the Banking Commission with Florian Hildreth. What you're looking at is a release agreement sent from Alex Walker to Hyder, Hyder was my attorney at the time. The reason why Cohen doesn't have a memory that it was Walker. He did when he talked to me. Is because Walker was using it as leverage. He created an issue with the DRA that didn't exist to get a release. And here it is in writing. All right. So now, don't miss this. Schwartz, my accountant, is saying he knows that the mistakes are on the tax returns. When Cohen asked him directly, why did you put it on the K1, where Schwartz as an accountant would know it was improper because he argued the hobby rule and we won, the counselor told me to do it and I forget his name. Well, that's Alex Walker. He had to put it on the K1 to leverage me with the DRA, which is why the DRA has postponed a federal court hearing for years, constantly. Not me, them, because they can't bring it to federal court. Or they will, they just don't want another federal judge to incriminate themselves. Because we've got a few, but before this ends, I'm going to turn around and give you those names. So, the lawyer told them to put it there, which is the leverage they used against me. Question. Were you told they were done wrong? You would have had a conversation back in an email. But a junior accountant from H&R Block would not make that mistake. Not once. Were you aware of the IRS for a hobby issue, weren't you? He goes, I was. He knows we won the hobby, so that tells him there's no way that should be on there. He should have known that. And you don't accept the fact that the lawyer told you, what? To charge your customer another $3-4 million that he shouldn't be paying? Next question. Right. The guy who works for Alex Walker, who works for the DRA. So you were familiar with the situation with the DRA. He says, I am not involved with the DRA. None whatsoever. Is that so? Well, how about we have a forged state tax return? Remember? It's been a favorite on our past videos. We'll make it again one today. And I want you to take notice that my name is forged. And that it came from your office. Cohen and Cohen right on it. You're saying you don't know the DRA. You don't know Maurice Gilbert. Well, you're working with Gilbert. You filed the DRA return. How's that for a straight out lie? You don't want to get too close to that because that could put you in jail. What you're seeing is a motion by Mr. Cohen. It seems Mr. Cohen has a special request on Judge Sobel. You know, the one that's performing the circus on Morris Mahoney of corruption. He's figuring, I guess if they can get off, they had me do all this criminal shit for them. I'm sure Judge Sobel will let me off too. So when you found the issues, the NOL and the K1, did you call the IRS to resolve all these issues? No. Why? I don't know. Right, that was his answer. You see, Cohen, well, let's look at Cohen. Let's see who we get with Cohen. Cohen could give you Miller, because Miller was there and Cohen knew he was there to corrupt it. And Miller can get you Cohen, vice versa. Cohen can get you Lisa Tracy. You know, my controller for 30 years. Do you know somewhere in the middle of that time she worked for one other individual? Mark Cohen. See? Shaheen was leveraging her with the molestation of her daughters with her husband. They were going to take them away. What happened is that she reached out to the one accountant that she knew that she worked for was Cohen. She knew the issue was there wasn't going to be an accountant to follow up behind this. Not off of that corruption, didn't see it. So Cohen's job was to stay and do nothing. If he didn't do anything with the DRA and he didn't do anything with the federal tax return, what's left? There wasn't anything. He forged those documents. That one state returned to Mass and one to New Hampshire. He kept the leverage on them so they would put on so I would settle and then resolve the issue with the IRS, which they knew I didn't owe any money. They created the situation. Who knew better? See? So if you get Cohen, you get Lisa. Now who's leveraging Lisa? Bill Shaheen. Gene Shaheen. How about getting them too? See? Then Walker. She can give you Walker. Walker is the puppet master. Who do you think's been giving Cohen instructions? Who do you think gave Freriedman instructions? Remember, it was Bill Tazia's cousin who was working with Freriedman on the audit. When they turned around and had Perlow and had Flory, you know who worked with them? Walker. That's why Freriedman didn't come out. He was the puppet master, and he organized the corruption in the court. You could even hear that in the deposition with Freriedman. And you know he didn't want to say that, but he didn't want to go to jail himself too. So, let's go. So that gives you Walker. Walker gives you CCR. CCR gives you Bill Tazia. Bill Tazia gives you Larry Schwartz. Right? And then Hyder. Remember Hyder case? You know why we went after Hyder? They kicked Hyder out. Right? We lost to Hyder. You know what happened? Our attorney didn't even show up. A guy named Weller wouldn't even communicate in writing to us ever. It was all a setup, and he basically said that. They kicked out the case because they couldn't go further with Hyder. See? Hyder gets you to Schwartz. See, they were all working together. And because Hyder was given the materials from the IRS from Walker. Now, remember Marisa Pizzuto? She used to work for the BBO. She made a phone call because when we approached Hyder about the phone call he had from Walker where Walker threatened him, if you remember, I said Marisa and Bob Dutress is there. Hyder jumped up and screamed when I said that. Man, I know why now. See, he didn't want to know that Walker leveraged him. So Marisa looked to see what we could find that he would leverage him on. Turns out, from the BBO, Marisa got the information that Hyder's father, who's in his 80s, was still practicing. He was disbarred. By Hyder's knowledge, working out of his office, Hyder would have lost his license. Walker now owns Hyder. Peabody Arnold defends Hyder, right? You know, the thing with the audits and the Mark Cohen, they were there. Now let's take a look. Ready? Peabody and Arnold is representing now, guess who? John Freriedman. No kidding, see? They're going to put the corrupt team right on him too. They know the problem. What a coincidence. So you see where that's giving us? Now Hyder. Now Hyder and Schwartz gives us the IRS Tim Powell. TIDCA. Are you listening? Because I'm going to send you this information. That puts the IRS in corruption with them. Remember Shaheen? Jean Shaheen got in trouble. You know what she got in trouble for? Manipulating audits of the IRS. Really now, what a coincidence. Another coincidence. See? You see what that gives us? I say they put leverage on O'Malley from TIDCA. Right. So, there's your tax piece. We have forged the DRA. Right? You'll see that. You see the message that he says, I never seen anything or did anything with the DRA. You see the canceled check that we paid him. You see the tax return with a forgery. That's what this piece gets us. Now, one more piece. Remember, in threes, you can see how they put this together. The corruption in the courts. You see, statutes of limitations, when I taught the corruption in the divorce, but my wife's medical records, I went after them. I didn't understand that I was talking to people like Ross and Dollar at the time that was working with them. And then the FRM scandal, and I notified Walker, who was my personal attorney and what I considered to be a friend. Like, I took him to the Breeders' Cup. He was walking my mother in a wheelchair the whole day. Such a nice gentleman, she said. This guy could be the Antichrist. So now, and you heard he was going to be wanting to run for governor. And between me and you, whether you liked him or not, he was going to be governor. All right. So this court corruption, remember how Freriedman goes to Walker about it. We can tie in. Now let's take a look who's there. Eric Renner, Morris Mahoney. They had to cover up for the mistakes before. Jutras carried the ball in the divorce past the statutes of limitations. Told us he was going to the FBI. Used Marisa as a buffer. Sorry, Marisa, but that's the case. And then he handed it all over to Morris Mahoney, who then had to continue the past statutes of limitations to get the cover-up team out. which is exactly what happened. And then 8 months later tells us they had a conflict? Really? You do that before. It's baloney. Even Freriedman called it malpractice because he couldn't have called it anything else. And guess what? Judge Sobel kicked that one out. We didn't have a third-party deposition. We just had Freriedman. They wanted to give him immunity and kick it out. Do you know Judge Sobel? I think she's 85 years old. Really. There's no mistake to that either. So we're also taking, if we can catch, Marisa catch Eric and Nick, we catch Eric and Nick and Morris Mahoney, which also gets us Duggan and Curley, right? Then we get a federal judge. And then that federal judge has things to explain. Like those text messages that threatened my children that she simply discarded. You see? That's it. So Renner's deposition is going to the Justice Department. You will see clearly that how guilty he is. Now with this court corruption, do you see what we get? We get multiple judges. I'll go over their names. We get the senators. We get justice in the courts. We get the politicians that put it. You get Walker. Walker's with Kakavas. He organized that fake prosecution. He's with everyone, Fleury and Hildreth and Shaheen. When they went to court to kick it out on one of my cases, he brought Arpie Saunders with them from Shaheen's office. They are working together. So you see all this corrupt court, it goes right through the political framework and structure of our state. This all comes apart. Now I've taken you from the top of the wall and taken you down. Pulled pieces to put it all together. But let me give you and finish with just the update. Because what we're going to do is keep exposing this by spreading it. Judge McHugh, right? He's the guy who kicked out Divine Millimat, CCR, the whole thing. Ted was my attorney. That was his job. He was to try to do that. If you went to listen to that hearing, that's why Ted was pulling his hair out. You know who was sitting right next to him? Jutras. See? You get both of them, you get the court corruption, and you get McHugh. The whole thing was staged. Now you remember, I had, in one of my last videos, I had a young woman that worked for me, that attorney Matt Murphy, who was representing Paul Russell, was threatening. This is a woman who just lost her baby. Her fiance was in trouble with a gun possession. You know who his judge was? Judge McHugh. Watch nothing happen about it. But what did happen was Christine, who was one of my most loyal employees that worked for me for over 13 years, she turned around and didn't say anything. I brought it to her attention about the video. Again, nothing. This was someone who was going to my victim meetings. And then she gave me someone to sit down with, a gentleman named Tim Risk, about business. I had a gentleman with me, another gentleman with me, so I have a witness to this. And Mr. Risk sat down and I said, geez, Tim, because I knew Tim from the past. I go, again, Christine put this together. He goes, I said, Tim, have you noticed the signs coming in? Have you seen the videos we've done? No, I haven't seen any of those. I go, all right. And then he said, in front of the witness, he goes, yeah, you know what? My wife works for the BBL. You could say she runs it. Remember, I have a witness. And then he says, I can't understand why you don't have a bullet in your head. Really, another bullet in my head. Really. Well, I went back to Christine. I said, Christine, you know anything about that? Because I do remember they were leveraging her daughter because I was trying to help them. And you know what she said? She goes, I noticed that you said on a comment that you had employees videotape talking to these people. That wasn't me, was it? I go, no, Christine. And after 13 years, she quit. Right? I exposed it, I caught it. But this is the a manipulation. This is an extortion. These are nice, good, honest people. See? So, right after that, the Russell case was thrown out by Judge Stearns. You know what their answer was? Oh, you got too many cases. Well, that's why they call it a RICO case. So there goes Russell. Right. So let's keep putting the blocks on. And McHugh, again, with the extortion and harassment of that young woman and her boyfriend. Right. Coretta. Let's update. It's the Lawrence case against Hyder. He took all our evidence, took those tapes, took the information. He didn't say too much, the fact that Attorney Weller didn't even show up. See, they had to kill the Hyder deal because Hyder deal gets you into the IRS, gets you into the tax fraud. See? Peabody and Arnold handled that. You know, the same guys who jumped over to Freriedman, which could get you into the banking piece. Coincidental? See? So he threw it out, even though they were 100% guilty, had those depositions of Cohen. I mean, now we filed an appeal. So Bell kicked out Morris Mahoney, wouldn't allow a third-party deposition. 85 years old. If we had Marisa, you've seen the narrative. We don't have a point. Freriedman, who sits on the BBO, said it was malpractice. But it was worse than that. It was covering up the crimes of the court. Renner was a dupe. Zobel kicked it out. Then Linda's judge, Nakamura's judge in Lawrence. Name is Groton, a federal judge. Been there months. We haven't heard anything. You know why? They're waiting for Barrington to get a dismissal here. Then they kick it back to New Hampshire. Now you don't got a case. We're waiting months. How did that even happen? Miller. How about this? Remember Miller as a spy? Well, she's got federal judge Nathan Gorton. Guess what? 16 times. That judge is saying, well, if you can't serve, we're going to dismiss the case. So guess what? I guess if you kill somebody, you just go into hiding. You know, after a while, the judge just says, hey, dismissed. Right. She's an offer of the court. They know what she is. You haven't ruled on that yet. You know why? Because that federal judge is afraid of going to jail himself. Zobel's 85. By the time you get her to jail, you know the rest. Freriedman. We filed a lawsuit in October. Do you know we haven't heard anything? No, what is that? 8 months? Now why do you think federal judge George O'Toole won't rule on this? He's out of the same courtroom. Remember, Ortiz's office is 3 floors up. He's right next to Sobel. In fact, you remember Linda's judge, you know what she said? I just want to make it clear, this isn't my case. And we weren't on the docket, in case someone wanted to look or had evidence that there was such a hearing. So, again, nothing. They're waiting here. Freriedman, they're petrified to put their name on that federal lawsuit. That's why Freriedman asked for Zobel. So the wall gets bigger. The judges get more. The attorneys get more corrupt. This guy Curley from Morris Mahoney, this is exactly what he was afraid of. The information that Marisa had. Why we couldn't have a third party. Listen, you Harvard puke. If you're the best they got, right? You're in big trouble. I learned more from your questions than you got from my answers. And my answers stayed the same. You're all going to jail. 2 more lawsuits to report. Ted Little. The guy, the texter. He just got in, he put in his claim for dismissal. Gonna get kicked out. Now whoever he gets, you know has got to be in the back. Because they can't have me question Ted Little. So he's gone. I remember, The other case I filed is Bob Jutras, the divorce attorney that was playing with the corruption of the court the whole time, was doing their job for him, was working with Morris Mahoney. Remember Rob Fitzgerald, Marisa, going up and down, we should call the cops? That was an act for you. That was to get Morris Mahoney in, all right? So whatever court gets Jutras, now it's filed in New Hampshire court. Now we're up for a show cause. They can't keep Jutras. Jutras has all the secrets with Ted. That's why this has got to be criminal. I'm going to call it ahead. They're both going to get dismissed because they can't be speaking. They promised them both. You're going to see a short video about me being in front of Judge Francois regarding the final divorce, where my life lied about the financials, selling a property. It was both. You'll get the idea. Just want you to know. He's in charge of the cover-up. Him and McHugh are drinking out of the same bowl. They know that she's dangerous. Linda Nakamura's leveraging. What do you think she's doing? Sarah. She's getting paid from them or me. But that's it. She knows the secrets. So Francois, here's all this. Here's the video. And just know this. Not only did I lose, I get a contempt. You know what they want? They want me to get life insurance. Now that my kids are 18 and older, they want a physical. They want to know if I have health issues. They want to know if I'm dying. No kidding. Sarah brought information regarding life insurance. It said, you'd be surprised to hear that, you could still have fourth stage cancer and get life insurance. That's nice to know. So I have a contempt to get it. So they want to know if I'm healthy or not. Just know this. Sarah is a way in. They're sealing all the entrances and the exits. This is the court corruption. You would find out that how Tolber, Ronnie Wise, who ran the PC, manipulated a mentally ill woman to steal millions, which is what they did. Only for me to catch them and cover up all their crimes, which brought us up to here. And Alex Walker, who could quite literally give you everybody. The U.S. Attorney Kakavas, Flory, Hildreth, Shaheen. You see, the guy's the devil, but if you gave him immunity, you'd be writing history books about what happens now. Thank you.